Would you believe it? 1 in 3 people in the United Kingdom cannot work out the correct change when they get to the shops. Financial literacy, it's called. It's an issue in other countries too. So should we all get lessons in it? Welcome to the Roundtable Classroom. Good to have your company. I'm David Foster. Making the right decisions about money can make a big difference to your quality of life. Pretty obvious, isn't it? But not everybody gets it right, and that can mean extra stress, a struggle to make ends meet. So some campaigners want schools to start teaching financial literacy.
If you understand inflation, numeracy, investment and compound interest, then you are financially literate. Half of the world's adult population do not understand these basic financial concepts. For most developed countries, financial literacy rates are lowest amongst young adults. On average, only 56% of people 35 or under are financially literate. In 2005, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development recommended that financial education be taught at an early age. An increasing number of countries are recognising the importance, but there are significant barriers, usually a lack of political will, lack of public money and insufficient expertise. The UK government has put financial literacy into the national curriculum since 2014, but it is not compulsory in many schools. Academic researchers found that a third of UK shoppers could not work out their change after a shopping trip. So how do we best improve financial knowledge for everyone?
Let us welcome from Los Angeles, Tom Ferry describes himself as an entrepreneur. We'll find out what kind in just a moment. Sam Lathy's here too, co-founder of Bipid, an app for financial planning. With me in the studio, we welcome Fiona Montgomery, who's head of education at My Bank, delivering financial education in UK schools, and Ismail Jailani, co-founder of Schoodle, an app that connects students and teachers. Let's bring in Sam first of all from Edinburgh. You've been out today with your Bipid ideas, teaching students what they shouldn't do. Have you been surprised by what they've told you? These are what, 18-year-olds?
Yes, so we're speaking to freshers, 18, 19-year-olds, if they've taken a gap year, and they've just arrived at university. And of course, this is a time in their life where there's a huge amount of change. For a lot of the people that we're talking to, this is the first time they've had their own bank account. It's the first time that they'll have their own bills to manage. And of course, in the UK, often, students will have a sizable student loan in their bank account, and that's a lot of responsibility for them to manage and budget.
Let's try and get this straight. It's not that they're thick, that they can't take it in, it's that nobody's ever bothered to tell them how to do it.
I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. I mean, we're talking to them that students know that having a credit card balance that isn't paid off costs them money, and most of them even know that it can affect their credit score, but they've arrived without any plan or strategy or knowledge base to start them on the right track. And I know from personal experience that if you do get off to a bad start at university, the knock-on effects can be really serious.
Yeah, I mean, we're not just talking about falling behind with exams, we're talking about getting massively into debt. Sam, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Tom, I'm going to come to you in just a moment to talk to you about a speech you gave, which was how to properly manage your money like the rich. Well, we've got to assume that you've got to that point first, but we'll chat about that in just a moment. Fiona, is it that people don't want to talk about money because it's an embarrassing subject?
Yeah, there's a lot out there. We work at My Bank in schools delivering financial education because, as you've described, there's a huge gap there. The UK Financial Capability Strategy outlined that actually there's only 52% of young people that have had any form of financial education. So that's why they're getting to university age and they're struggling. And there is a definite In society right now, people don't want to talk about money. It's a bit of a taboo subject, and people are burying their heads.
Yeah, there is an advert running on British television at the moment where they say, no, we don't talk about it. I'm terribly sorry, no, we haven't got around to that. And you think it's about something awful, but in fact it is
It's
simply
money.
about money matters. Ismail, did you find it difficult to educate yourself?
It's weird because I think I was forced into it. Like in most cases, you tend to find that the 18, 19, 20-year-olds that get money either do so because they've come from very wealthy, educated backgrounds, or because life has forced them into that position. And in my case, for example, I chose not to take a student loan to fund my degree, probably more out of stubbornness than anything else. But in doing that, I was like, well, whatever happens, I need to make this work, otherwise I have to drop out of university. And in doing that, I was forced to learn a lot more than maybe I would have had I not been in that position.
Is there something you wish somebody told you?
It would have been a lot easier, yeah, for sure. Because what ends up happening is the things that I would learn aged 22, 23, 24, there are people that would have learned that 10 years prior, and that makes a huge difference.
So you came across people who had learned these things. Where had they learned it from? Do you think from their parents, from their place they had in society, through schools, places like Fiona's? They didn't exist then, did they?
Yeah, no, so I'd say kind of without doubt that it didn't happen anywhere near as much in the classroom. So the only other place that you could learn this is at home. And homes are very, very different learning environments. People that are living on very low income backgrounds, the priorities are different. Forget, growing wealth. You need to figure out how to, put food on the table and a roof over your head. So these things about bonds and ETFs and all these buzzwords, they wouldn't even touch the vocabulary of certain families.
Tom, you've been sitting there patiently. I mentioned how to properly manage your money like the rich. One of the things you said in that talk, which is out there on YouTube, is change how people think about money. We have to change how people think about money. What change needs to be made?
You and Fiona were just discussing it. Money is a taboo for a lot of people, and there's so many ways you can change it. But I think here in the U.S., perhaps different from in the U.K., I believe it needs to be federally mandated. I think there needs to be, from the president or Congress down, an initiative to change how people view money, understanding basic money management. I was just spending some time doing research before this session. Here in the US, 76% of millennials admit that they have little to no financial literacy. Well, we're talking about 78 million people coming into the workforce who don't understand why bad debt is a bad idea, why student loans are potentially going to be a threat for them. And forget buying a house. These people can't even manage a checkbook. So I think it all comes down to exposure and education. That's generally speaking.
We will talk in a moment about what kind of education there could be, because it's not quite like learning a language or learning geography, where it's pretty straightforward. There are so many different avenues to this. But I want to get on to the fact that you feel it should be compulsory. Is there any sense that that is actually going to happen in your country? And we'll talk about here in a moment.
I couldn't imagine it happening, unfortunately. I think many of the panelists are talking about the same thing. It needs to come from the house. The challenge is right now, you look in China, they are doing it. They are teaching their children about money. They're telling them to go home and have conversations with their parents about saving 10% of every dollar that they earn. If we can pull it off in the U.S., I can see in a generation us having transformation. Maybe not in the worst parts of our country in terms of financial poverty, but certainly in the lower middle class and middle class, we could have a massive transformation in how we view money, how we save money, and ultimately, at the end of the day, create more wealth.
Something I dug up on China, interesting that you mentioned it, and it sort of shines another light on it, which it says credit card ownership's doubled since 2011 to 16%, yet only half of those people who now have a credit card can perform simple calculations related to interest. Where do you start when you want to teach people, Fiona?
Well, we tried to start as young as possible. So money habits, the research has suggested that money habits are formed by age 7. So it's really important that actually we're working with young people from a very young age.
By the age of 7?
Yep, by the age of 7, habits are formed.
Well, when you get your 5p pocket money or whatever?
So it's really important that actually we start at a young age, and that is with both financial education, but in the home, everyone who interacts with a young person. So in the home, parents can really work with their child, be it with pocket money, so they're actually experiencing the use of money, It could be helping them with shopping, kind of budgeting for that, but it's really important that those conversations are happening both in and outside of the classroom in order to kind of further
The difficulty is, what kind of lessons are you getting at home, the right ones or the wrong ones? Sam, I don't want to bring up your family history too much, but you said your mum and dad both had a different approach to money, and that confused you a bit.
Yes, it did. So I guess there is a piece to this puzzle that we're trying to solve that comes from the family, but you know, a lot of working class families won't be educated about investments and savings and interest rates, as they may do if their family situation have had experience of this with personal wealth. But I think that, you know, there's a real gap here in getting children the advice that they need. And Fiona's point that, you know, it needs to start early. Yes, absolutely. You know, you're at school learning trigonometry and how to do equations, but yet you're not being taught how to move on with these fundamental life skills like budgeting and managing your finances and avoiding high interest debt. So there needs to be a piece of the curriculum there that addresses that.
You don't have to wait for me to ask a question, because you're all such interesting people in this subject. But I'm going to ask one question, and each one of you could respond if you like. When you get into the classroom, say, Fiona, or any one of you when you're giving a lecture, Tom, what is the first piece of advice you would give to somebody who is at the lower end of the scale in terms of age and experience of money?
I mean, I think it depends entirely, first of all, on the circumstance. And I think it's really important that you encourage people to talk about it, because if you're not talking about
You
it,
can't, with a 7-year-old, you can hardly start to talk about interest rates,
so
etc., etc. What would you say to a 7-year-old? Money's important, you're going to need it throughout your life. Make sure you save it, what?
So money gives us options, it gives us choices. You have to think about your future. So our program in primary schools, we focus on 3 things. So money, choices, future. So actually, what is money? Where did it come from? How do you earn it? What choices does it give you? And when you have those choices, actually what the consequences that might lead to, and then actually thinking forwards about your future.
You see, I'm not sure about this. Ismail, when you were 7 years old, if somebody had asked you to think about your future, you might have thought it was a game of conkers in the playground the next day, mightn't you?
I mean,
I know I would have done.
I'd personally approach it from an aspirations perspective, because I think a lot of the attitude towards money is shaped around what you want to do or what you want to become. And so this understanding of, you know, what is a good salary? What is the best salary? What can I aspire to be? And that's kind of the angle that I personally take with things like entrepreneurship, less so because everybody needs to build a business, but at the very least, everybody should feel like it's a possibility.
So you deal with dreams, perhaps?
So how we also look at it is in terms of habits. So we look at positive money habits and we look at delayed gratification, because obviously we live in an instant gratification world. And actually, you know, if you ask a child, do you want this now? They're going to want it, but actually trying to teach them to be able to resist temptation and actually save things for later. And that's where the future part comes in.
But they don't know there's such a thing as a rainy day, do they? They think the sun shines every day and it's always going to be okay.
Quite possibly, but that's why we're there, to engage with them, to try and get them to have
so you
positive
put the fear of God
habits.
in them.
No, it's about having positive money habits, so actually thinking positively about something instead of...
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be flippant, but yes, Tom.
So I want to just piggyback on what Ismail said. I agree. I think you actually can have conversations with kids that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. I have an 18 and 20-year-old son. I've been in the dialogue with them since they were 2 and 4. We would drive around our community and we'd say, we own that building. Let me explain what rent is. Let me explain what a mortgage is. And you know, I loved Fiona's point. I wrote it down that money habits are formed by the time they're 7 years old. I'm proud of the fact that I've been in that dialogue with them. You know, you have a choice. Your income will be in direct correlation to the value that you deliver the marketplace. You know, if you want to have nicer things, if you want to live in this type of house versus rent an apartment like that. I was in that dialogue with my kids very early, and certainly my nieces and my nephews, and now with friends and family and anyone else that will listen, because I do believe, as Ismail said, it is inspirational, it's aspirational, right? To get them to start thinking about the kind of lifestyle they want, and therefore the choices that they need to make early. If we get them early and we get them to start thinking perhaps differently than a lot of the drones worker bee mentality that so many people have today, we can change the world.
Okay. I was looking at a website called Financially Mint. You may be aware of it. I think it started in the United States. And the founder of this website said it used to be that you would be told to get good grades, you'd get good grades, and you'd have a job for 40 years, and everything was dealt with. Sam, and this is for everybody again, the world has changed so much that if you don't catch up with this, you're going to be left far behind, not just as a young person, but as a maturing adult as well.
No, absolutely. And I think to Tom's point, it's, you know, there's only so much that you control about the inputs. You can educate your children as effectively as possible, but they're still going to be saturated by advertising and unrealistic expectations of what they can have in their life. And I think there needs to be a real sort of realism and reality check, because there is no winning lottery ticket for most people. There's no silver bullet. If you want to get on the property ladder, especially in the UK, you have to make some hard choices. And there's a real piece of education around that the shiny things and the celebrity culture that you see on the TV and on social media, that's not for everyone, but that's okay. And getting people to have a sustainable financial relationship is something that's really, really important.
I have a bit of a difficulty here, which is, as I mentioned earlier, it's easy to teach a language because you can either speak it, write it, or you can't. It's there in a book. It's the same with geography. That mountain's over there. This is how it was formed. But when it comes to money, it's about who do you trust? And that's one of the difficulties, Ismail, isn't it? There's so much advice out there that it's very difficult to know what is good and what is bad.
It's an interesting one, because I think one of the most important lessons was what Fiona mentioned around understanding delayed gratification, because I think that's really at the heart of it. And the closest example that I can think of is you go to a kid and say, here's £5 today, or you can wait a month and I'll give you £10 instead. To just conceptualize what it means to wait and get something instead. One of the biggest problems with this mentality of focusing on salaries only is that it's centered around, you know, your 30, 40, 50K salary for the year. And that's the only way that you can think about the world. You don't actually get to conceptualize the future. And you're right, that may still not change a lot of people.
But it is difficult, isn't it? Because there's so much financial advice out there.
Yeah.
Is your message, don't believe the person who tells you you can have jam today?
My message is more, speak to as many people as you can and learn from different sources, because then you can actually start weighing up decisions. This isn't about, this is the path to financial success. I think that's probably not the way to go.
It's a little bit like, though, isn't it? When I lived in America, when I first went into a supermarket there were about 25 choices of dressing. And I was confused by the fact there was so much to choose from. It was a lot easier here when I went in and I picked up a thing of salad cream, because there was only one thing to choose from. How do you know which is the good one to choose, Fiona?
I mean, I think a lot of this is actually reviewing what is out there, and I think there's so many different financial products, and so many people giving you advice. Ultimately, it comes down to a case of getting that knowledge, getting that information, and being able to synthesize that into understand.
But how do you do that if you don't know who to trust? This is my problem with this. Is okay, I trust you because you've been invited into my school if I'm a young person, and you are accredited with a particular organisation, let us say. But when I go online, I haven't a clue. And you say, well, take it all in.
It's about having the knowledge, isn't it? So, for example...
But you don't know whether it's knowledge or whether it's complete bunkum.
But if we're talking about APR v AER, and we're talking about I'm looking at a credit card, and if I'm going, I've not had any financial education, I don't know what I'm looking for online, I'm going to pick that one because it's sparkly and nice and looks good, and everyone's talking about it. Or I've had some financial education, and I now know that actually having a high APR is not a good thing.
Annual percentage rate.
And to look, annual percentage rate. And to look at that, and then I now know, I'm looking at all of them and I can go, right, actually that's the better deal for me, because I now have that knowledge and I have the tool to be able to assess whether that's the right choice for me or not. And that's the lack of knowledge that we have at the moment.
Do you think
there's not enough financial education
Tom was
out there.
talking about it being mandatory. What do you think about that here in the UK?
So it's mandatory for secondary school. It's not for primary. It's not mandatory.
I never got it at secondary school, but that was some time ago.
Yep, it's now mandatory.
As you might guess.
It's not mandatory for all schools and all ages.
Yeah.
And where it is mandatory, there's little time given to it because of constraints of other exams. And there's a lack of kind of support for teachers as well. And I believe it's really important that if you're going to deliver financial education or you're going to teach financial education, that it needs to be expert-led. And teachers don't, unfortunately, have the time or support to be able to do that.
And are we seeing more and more people do the same things that you do with My Bank, which I should say is my BNK, because that's up with the modern generation. My bunk, but it said bank.
Some young people named us, and it's MYBNK, so there's no A in
And
there.
are we seeing more and more
spell.
people offering the same sort of service that you do?
Similar, yeah. There's a lot of kind of different mediums. So there could be teacher CPD, there's teacher resources. We offer actually for us as experts to go into the classroom to take that pressure off teachers and ensure that we kind of give condensed sizable chunks of information that actually will
Yeah, one of the worries, and Ismail, you talk about delayed gratification. One day you're going to be a bit older than you are now. One of the worries is that people without financial literacy cannot plan for their retirement. They're unable to look after themselves. So it's not just a question of young people, it's older people too, isn't it?
No, for sure. And I keep coming back to this notion of delayed gratification, because I think that the core problem isn't here's your financial solution. It's here's the information that you should probably have before you make the decision. And coming back to this idea of interest rates, it feels very, very good to get a big loan now and to be happy today. But it feels good because you don't actually know its impact in 1, 3, 5, 10 years' time. You may still decide that, you know what, even though I know what life is going to look like in 10 years, I'm still happy to do that. But the most important thing is that the awareness and the knowledge is actually covered. And that applies whether you're 10 years old or whether you're 30 or 40. It's knowing the implications of your decisions.
BIPIT does what Sam, to help the students that you were talking to today?
So we take away the guesswork. So with BIPIT, you connect an existing bank account, and then you receive an achievable plan to improve your situation. And that situation could be anything from really struggling with debt on credit cards to actually having a healthy situation and looking to do something with the money. And I think there's an interesting point here about the expert advice, because to your point, there's lots of information out there and it can be overwhelming and it creates an awful lot of anxiety. But to get expert advice from a regulated financial advisor is something that's only available to the wealthiest at the moment. Most advisors turn away people who have less than £50,000 already saved up.
So how do you change that?
Well, we use technology to automate it. So by using algorithms, we can be effectively an AI financial advisor and deliver these kind of services to people who desperately need them, because everyone could do with a bit of help to improve their financial situation.
And you're obviously selling your product, if not for money, then certainly in terms of its value to these students. What do you think they will have taken away? How much do you think will have sunk in?
Well, we make it completely free for students, and that's obviously really important. We want to reach people as early as we can in their lives, and we're looking at that as the time when they first get their bank account. But in terms of it sinking in, it comes back as really, really strong that someone just gives them effective information, because to your point again, there's an awful lot of it out there, and actually figuring out what's right is really, really difficult. So having it all in one place and delivered in a sensible and easily digestible way is something that's really, really important.
So the one message I'm getting from each and every one of you is that you've got to catch them young. You've got to catch them before they make mistakes. It's the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Give me a child before the age of 7, and they will be mine for life. And Tom, you talk about your two sons, I think you said, 18, 22 or something like that. Have they taken on board all of your advice? Are they doing sensible things?
Well, let's be clear. They're 18 and 20-year-old young men. So are they listening to all of my advice? Certainly not. But when it comes to being an entrepreneur, when it comes to creating value in the marketplace, they've both figured out that even being in high school, you can still start a small business. You can figure out ways to create money. You can get a job. Both of them are pretty good savers. Both of them have money in the stock market. At my younger son's school, I want to say in about the 4th grade, there was conversation about money. There was the possibility of a side. I think they said it was like an investment club. And even though they weren't playing with real dollars, they were in discussion about buying companies through the public markets. And it created a fantastic impact on my children.
Okay, Ismail, what are your ambitions for the future in terms of Scoodle and helping others as well to manage their finances?
My vision for Scoodle is to be able to build the LinkedIn for teachers. It's a way for teachers to brand themselves and to actually stand out in the world. And beyond that, for me, a lot of it is centered around not just the building of the company, but what that journey is like, and to make that as accessible to the rest of the world. In a way that, if you have an idea, where do you get your first $10,000 from if you need it? Especially if you don't have a connected family and friends network, it would need to come from somewhere. And it's being able to have these conversations so that the rest of the world actually feels like, hey, I have an idea, I could do it too.
Listen, thank you very much indeed. Good luck with all your teaching, Fiona. Thank you very much indeed. Good luck with Scoodle, with Bipit, with your entrepreneurial work and raising a financially sound family. Tom, thank you for joining us on the programme. Thank you very much for watching. I think, as I said, the lasting message to take away from here is catch them young and they won't make a mess of their finances, at least hopefully. From me, David Foster, from the team that put this together, from my guests, thank you for watching. Hope to have your company next time. Goodbye for now.